very rare blood disorder. It's not very common. Unlike many other diseases that you see or you know or you hear about quite often, this is very rare. It's just about 4 to 6 people in a million that get it. So it's not as common as other diseases that are much common. Now, the thing that characterizes it is the fact that it causes clotting in small vessels. Clotting in small vessels. And that is what makes it thrombotic. So thrombotic means it causes thrombus, which is like a blood clot. Okay, so that's where that first part of the word comes from. The other part is thrombocytopenic. So you have that the part of the red blood cells called platelets. They are reduced. They are reduced to such an extent that it causes this clotting. Okay, so that's, you've seen 2 parts of the name now, thrombotic and thrombocytopenic. Now the purpura bit is just what I have on the first slide, which is that. It's like there are small rashes on the skin. They look like bruises on the skin. That's one of the symptoms. Again, these are late symptoms. These are not things you pick up early. But if you see things like this, these are things to be worried about. Or any form of bleeding, blood in urine or blood in any other thing, any other body fluid that shouldn't be there, these are things to be aware of and to worry about. So I hope the name will be a bit easier to remember now. 3 parts of it: thrombotic, blood clots; thrombocytopenic, because it causes reduced platelets; and purpura, because it causes these bruises on the skin. Are we happy with that? Right, so when blood clots in the tiny vessels, if it clots in the bigger vessels, we may not notice, but in smaller vessels, when it clots, what it does is it causes an obstruction. So you can imagine if you've got drains, and then the drains get blocked. The bigger ones may continue to flow, but the tiny pipes will not flow, and it means the organs at the far end will not get blood supply. Blood carries what? Carries oxygen. It means if you don't get oxygen, those end organs get damaged. Are we on the same page here? Right. So that is one of the key ways in which this disease affects human beings. Now, the key organs that it affects, the main one is the brain. The brain, once oxygen doesn't get to the brain, it affects the brain. Once oxygen doesn't get to the kidneys, it affects the kidneys. And of course, once oxygen does not get to the heart as well, it affects the heart. So those are the key ones, but it affects mainly all organs of the body. Now, it can be acquired and it can be congenital. When we say congenital, it means someone can be born with it. It means the person can inherit it from his parents or her parents. Like I said, 4 to 6 people per million have it all over the world. But this is actually increasing now because people are getting to know it more. Hence this kind of awareness. We want people to know more about it. We want people to recognize these symptoms when you see it and at least seek for help. So that's one of the things we need to know. And in the UK, you're finding that that number is even increasing because people are getting to find out more. Unfortunately, it affects more women than men. So you find 3 women having it before 2 men will have it. There are so many other diseases that affect women more, but this is one of them that affects women more. Again, it affects black ethnic minority. Unfortunately, it affects us more. It also affects Asians more than it affects the general population. It's commonly seen in the 40s, so people from the 40s, age of 40, that's when it's the most common, the prevalence. But you find out that you can find it in babies and you can find it even in older people. So basically, it can affect anybody. Well, I don't want to bog you down with this, but the main thing that is missing there is an enzyme in the body that is, once it's missing, it allows these things to happen. Okay, so I think I'll just leave it that way. I don't want to start calling all those names and bore you. Right, so these are the facts. It's rare. Always remember it's rare, but when we say rare, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It does happen. And the incidence is getting more because people are finding out more about it. 3.7 cases all in all. But in the UK, we're finding at least 6 people per million are being diagnosed with this. Now, what are the main triggers for it? So you find out that everybody, all of us are here, nobody has anything written on their forehead that this is happening. But what happens is there are some things that can actually trigger it. Unfortunately, we say this is commoner in women, and for many women, it actually is triggered after pregnancy or during pregnancy. So pregnancy can be one to trigger it, and in many of the women, 10 to 25% of cases, that's when they actually find out, when during pregnancy something goes wrong, and you find out what is wrong, and they eventually diagnose the lady with TPP. There are other conditions, like Aunt Fola actually said, there are other conditions that actually are closely related to it, and lately there's so much research going on to find out what is the relationship between these. One of those are autoimmune conditions. There are so many autoimmune conditions. Those are conditions that are caused by the body fighting itself. For unknown reason, the body itself decides to fight itself. And those are called autoimmune conditions. One of them is called SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus. And that is commoner in black people and ethnic minorities. And that is one of the conditions that actually occur with this. Most times when you find children with TPP, you find some of them even with SLE as well, or vice versa. The other thing is cancer. Many cancers, you find out that either the treatment of that cancer or even the cancer itself brings about this TPP. Some other infections as well can do that. HIV is an infection as well. That can also bring about or trigger TPP. Now, there are some things we do in the medical profession, we call them iatrogenic. So basically, there are things based on what medical science has done to someone can trigger this thing. So we have things like even medications. There are some medications we give that can trigger this. Unfortunately, those are things that cannot be avoided. Now, you will find out that one of the treatments that we do for rare conditions or conditions that like cancer and all that is bone marrow transplant, and unfortunately even that can trigger it. And some other conditions in which we use some medications to suppress the immune system can also trigger it. And like I said, some other medications, I've mentioned a few of them there. So basically, you will see, looking at all this, can anybody say they're exempted from this? No, so hence the awareness. We need to know. We're not praying that we should have it, but it's something that we need to be aware of, so that if you notice it, we look out for treatment quickly. Now, these are just the types. Like I said, the hereditary one, that's the one that is passed from one parent to the other. The other thing with that is actually transmitted by a system called autosomal recessive, which means the child that gets it gets a part of it from the mother and a part from the father. This is the same way that sickle cell is transmitted. So those are some of the connections that we're finding. Now, can there be anything more, that relates sickle cell to this, especially when we know that sickle cell is commoner in Black and Asian, more Black community, and this is also commoner as well. And then the idiopathic one, or the one that we don't know what has caused it. And of course, the secondary one that is secondary to something else. Is it secondary to medication or secondary to some other procedure we have done? So what are the symptoms? So many symptoms. Unfortunately, the main symptoms that you first get are symptoms you can get in any infection. You get things like flu-like conditions. We all get flu. It doesn't mean when you get flu, you run to the GP and say, oh God, I think I have TPP. No. But I mean, it's just to look at other things. What else is there? Is it just ordinary flu, or is there more to it? So flu-like symptoms can be there. But I've broken it down to what organs, that it affects and where you can get those symptoms based on those organs. So in the blood, it causes low platelets, which was the thrombocytopenia I spoke about earlier on. It causes low platelets, which can lead to bleeding. So you find out that someone has bleeding nose, bleeding, blood in urine, blood in different organs, or bruising, that's because there's low platelets in the body. Normally you find out that platelets are at least about 400 in the blood per several, at least 400. But when it gets as low as 50, that's when people start to bleed spontaneously. You're just sitting down eating and then blood starts to stream out of your nose or from the gum or all that. If that's happening, of course, if you've blown your nose and all that, you can imagine that that's why it is. But for no reason, you're just bleeding, and you need to see your GP to find out what is happening. In the brain, you find out that because there's a low blood supply to the brain, then you'll find people get confused. People get all sorts of things because blood is not getting to the brain. Headaches, some people speech problems, and some people they just go into a coma. And you're like, what's wrong? Well, what has happened to this person? And then from the coma, they diagnose TTP. So it can actually be anything. Kidney failure, that's another thing. Kidney failure, you find blood in urine, protein in urine. Sometimes it's even micro blood that you cannot see with your eyes. Okay, so in those cases again, if you notice them, then go to the GP. If they find blood in your urine, then they will normally investigate that. Then other things are fever, pallor that's low, the person looks pale, basically. Fever, jaundice, bone pains, joint pains, we get these most times. We get some of these symptoms, but it doesn't mean it's TPP, but just be aware that these things can be part of TPP. Some people get chest pain, heart failure, all other symptoms can happen as well. Now, how does it present? Again, a bit of what I've said earlier on. Actually, some people still have abdominal pain as well. So they are quite vague symptoms. But it's when you put these symptoms together, then you start to worry, why am I getting all this in succession? That's when it becomes a worry. But if you get them alone, don't get worried. Just remember. Okay, so the management. This bit I want to stress. If you find out that someone has TPP or it's been diagnosed, sorry, TTP. Yes, sorry, I forgot. I think I mixed it up. Yeah, if you find out someone has TPP, it is TTP. It is a medical emergency. It's a medical emergency. Basically, if someone has a stroke now, it's a medical emergency. We'll probably get an ambulance down, get a helicopter down, whatever. The person needs to be in the hospital enough time to actually get the treatment. Within a few hours, the treatment needs to be done. Same thing with TPP, it's just that we don't know so much about it. Within 4 to 8 hours, someone needs to be treated. If not, 90% of the cases, 90% of the cases is death. So it is that serious. It is that serious. I don't want to scare us, but I need to emphasize this, okay? Right, I'm just going to move on. But there is good treatment, okay? There's treatment now, plasmapheresis, we can do all that. And once that is done...
So what's the survival if you get there within 4 hours?
If you get there within 4 hours, 30%. Yeah, once the treatment is available, again, it is very, very good. The prognosis is good. So you can imagine that difference, 90% to 30%. It's very important that we diagnose it on time, and the gold standard is IV treatment. And there's some cases where you find out that some people are not responding to treatment on time, or because that treatment is not available, they do other things, like very high dose steroids are used as well. So normally steroids can be very good, but if you use them over a long period of time, they do cause some side effects. Now most times we just use low doses, 30, 60 milligrams of steroids. That's prednisolone. For this, we have to use about 200 milligrams a day, so which is a very high dose just to sustain. But like I said, this is still not the treatment. The hallmark is IV frozen plasma. There's a new medication that has been trialed, and that medication has been successful so far. It's called rituximab. Again, it's not the gold standard. The gold standard is still IV plasmapheresis, but what we can do is to still use this for cases that are relapsing very frequently. And there are other things that can be done. We've all got spleens, which is a big organ that actually fights the body. It's part of the body's defense organism. So defense against organisms in the body. So what they can do in some cases when the person is not responding to treatment is to actually take away the spleen, and that helps some people. But again, that's not the full treatment. So I've just explained how you can do the plasma exchange. Now, I put in red there replacement with a donor plasma. Okay, a donor plasma means someone has donated that plasma, which is the hallmark of treatment. The problem is in the black and ethnic minority, we have very, very few donors. Unfortunately, we have very, very few donors. So you can imagine we have a rare condition, and not even just one, we have rare conditions, sickle cell, asthma, sickle cell, SLE, and TTP. And then we have very few people to provide the treatment. Okay, so that puts us at greater disadvantage. Unfortunately, that doesn't sound very good. And this is not just in the UK, this is all over the world. So it means we need people to actually be donors, not just for plasma donors, but also for different organs of the body. I'm happy the government is working on changing the law in this country to say it will be opt-out rather than opt-in. But so far, we're still using the opt-in method to donate blood and to donate organs. So please, this is again another medium I'm using to tell all of us to try and be aware of this and try and be donors. I put some links there, which are the links for the blood donation as well as blood and other transplants that can be given on the NHS website. If you Google them, you'll find them. A few stories there, I'm not going to bore us with them, but you find them on the website of people that have either donated or people that have actually been beneficiaries. This lady donated a stem cell. And when she went, she normally donates blood regularly, and I think when she decided to do this, because she's black, she had many blacks that don't have, and she did donate, and a stem cell 4 years later was found to be a perfect match for a child in a 9-year-old child in Chile. Can you imagine? That's over 7,000 miles away. She didn't know, she doesn't know this child from Adam, but that 9-year-old child would have died if not for her. Our parents were, his parents rather, were ready to donate theirs. They were not perfect matches. You see how things work? His parents were really ready to say, oh, take mine, but they were not the perfect match. But a lady that is not related to him, 7,000 miles away, was a perfect match. And she saved the boy's life. The boy is, I think he's 10 years old now, going on to 11. A few more stories, I'm not going to bore us with them. But then a few organizations that help. Of course, this organization that has brought us here together today is the main one that we know about, but there are other organizations and support groups available. I've put them on there, and I'd just like to resound again, take home message. If you have any symptoms you're worried about, see your GP. Symptoms are very vague, but if they're persisting and getting worse, then see your GP. If you know anybody that has it, please tell them it's an emergency, needs to be sorted quickly. Many people, the truth is, even in the medical profession, are not aware of this. You know, everybody's aware of stroke, but this is as bad as stroke. So we need to be aware of it. And please try and find out about giving blood and donating organs. They are not going to be useful for us anyway. Right, I hope that was not too scary. It was scary. Right, okay, but there's light. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Right, are there questions, right?
Any questions?
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Dr. Yomi.